The reflecting mind often thinks that its secret activities or its hidden thoughts are unseen and unknown by anyone else. However, as soon as an image is formed in the unit mind, it is immediately reflected on the cosmic mind. That's why one cannot do anything unknown to him. When a man steals something, the Supreme Entity will immediately come to know of the theft. When the police arrest him and he denies his crime, he knows that he is telling a lie, so the Supreme Entity also knows he is telling a lie. If the dishonest policeman accepts a bribe and lets him go, the man knows that the policeman has accepted a bribe, so Paramapurusha also knows. Later, when the policeman suffers a major tragedy, such as the death of his son, his eyes fill with tears of bitterness, and he complains, "Why has such a terrible misfortune struck me? I haven't done anything wrong." This complaint will immediately be heard by the Supreme Entity, who will ask the policeman in the core of his heart, "Did I take the bribe?" That Supreme Entity knows everything. To know that Supreme Entity, the Benevolent One will have to keep one's mental plate perfectly clean by practicing intense intuitional sadhana. The first stage of sadhana is yama and niyama, strict moral observances, the foundation of spiritual life, the light which dispels the darkness of static ignorance. By perfecting the 10 principles of yama and niyama, spiritual aspirants gain the spiritual vigor required to wage the constant war against the dullness of staticity. Theirs is a valiant and relentless fight against the obstacles created by avidya maya, which try to detract them from the path of the attainment of Brahma. Their supreme goal, their final desideratum, their pole star, the only ideal of their lives. In the social sphere, they struggle not to reform society for the sake of reformation, but to combat the defects of inconsistencies in all walks of life which are detrimental to spiritual life and a stumbling block on the path of attaining the supreme goal. In short, they seek to build a balanced, harmonious spiritual society. Their endeavor to remove the thorns scattered along the path of progress is ceaseless. Usually, those people whose sole aim is to bring about social, intellectual, and economic reforms collapse in exhaustion after achieving a certain amount of success and either giving up or get confused. But this does not happen to sadhakas, because their main focus is not the struggle, but how to reach the goal. Thus they wage a ceaseless struggle against all kinds of defects and distortions. With their two most important weapons, yama and niyama, all sadhakas are soldiers, whose rations are knowledge, whose drink is action, and whose salt is devotion. Just as food without salt becomes bland, similarly, knowledge and action without devotion become meaningless. You should bear in mind that if there is devotion, there is everything. If there is no devotion, there is nothing. It is true that without knowledge, one may be misguided, and without action, one may become inert. But it is only through devotion that one can attain the supreme stance. Knowledge and action alone cannot lead one to the attainment of the Supreme Entity. In practice, although in theory it may be possible, their importance lies in the way they complement devotion. Suppose you know a man called Ramesh lives in a certain far-off place. This is the extent of your knowledge about him. To meet him you undertake a long and arduous train journey. This is your action. On arriving at his house, you knock at his door and call him so that he comes to greet you and invite you inside. This is your devotion. If a person lacks knowledge and action and calls him on the strength of devotion, it is not altogether impossible to attain him, but that path is somewhat inconvenient. That's why I say that even though one's mission may be fulfilled through the devotion alone, It is better to complement devotion with knowledge and action. Dry knowledge, whatever its quality, cannot help a person to attain the supreme goal of life, because it lacks sweetness. A life devoid of sweetness ultimately becomes useless. Like the hollow shell of a tree struck by lightning, neither can action alone bring the highest fulfillment to human life, because people tend to become so wrapped up in it that it becomes their obsession. Their fundamental goal gets obscured before their eyes. Those sadhakas who advance, maintaining a balanced adjustment amongst the three, will ultimately realize the supreme entity. Even those who want to remove the feeling of differentiation from the relative world and look upon the supreme entity with an integral outlook need to develop their knowledge, action, and devotion. Yet in this case, too, devotion is more important than knowledge and action. Those sadhakas whose heart overflow with sweet devotional sentiment can break the shackles of superstition far easier than those following the codes of knowledge and action. It is often seen that those who deliver bombastic speeches on the merits of knowledge, of those who have some reputation as social activists, unhesitatingly support narrow sentiments such as casteism, provincialism, nationalism, etc. It is often the so-called pundits who fall prey to social vices such as acceptance of bribes, falsehood, promiscuity, or alcoholism. Many of those who have encouraged discrimination between human beings and caused the pages of the history books to be stained with blood are the same people whom society respects as pandits and activists. But such feelings of pettiness are absent in devotees, for they love humanity out of deep devotional sentiment. Would you ever ask a drowning person, are you Hindu, Muslim, Brahmin, or untouchable? Of course not. The inspiration not to do that lies hidden in your underlying devotional sentiment. Bhakti Bhagavato Seva Bhakti Prema Swarupini Bhakti Rananda Rupasha Bhakti Bhaktasya Jivanam. Devotion is the spirit of service to the Supreme Entity. It is an embodiment of selfless love, an embodiment of bliss, the very life of a devotee.